Hello, welcome. So what you just saw was my Witchhunter build. Uses Armour break as foundation, and I came up with this build mostly due to using Last Lament. Crossbow skills are really cool, but reload speed and all that is just a pretty annoying stat to scale for the most part. So I wanted to be able to shoot without having to reload, and that's what Last Lament allows. And I am playing Witchhunter because the weapon swap points are really cool, so I just wanted to see what I can make with this, and that's why I came up with this build. So let's talk about the skill gems. So for the skill gems, I'm using Siege Cascade for mapping, and it has Armor Break 3 on it, Defy 2 because we're using the Constricting Command Viper helmet, of course, and Life Leech 3 to offset the downside of Last Lament. We're using mobility so that we can just shoot without being slowed down too much, and then pin 2 just lets us build pin on enemies, and with Siege Cascade 80% more damage against immobilized enemies, so helps a lot with the clear. And pin also helps with combat frenzy, but we'll talk about that. High velocity rounds is our bossing setup, so this is going to be on our weapon swap 2. This has blindside because we inflict blind pretty easily. Garcon's resolve for bifurcated critical hits, basically lets us do double crit damage bonus if we hit it. And then pinpoint critical, more crit chance. Inevitable critical, more crit chance. And then brutality 3. I think this one's probably the one that you can switch around the most. It would likely be like Heft, Defy, and Brutality is what I've come up with, but I just like the consistency of Brutality. And then Permafrost Bolts, this is what we use to weapon swap with high velocity rounds, because what it does against armor broken enemies is that when it inflicts a debuff where every hit afterward does 5% of what your velocity round does. So we're scaling the damage as high as possible, and then afterward we want to hit them as much as possible. So how we do that is using Permafrost Bolts, which fires the most, I think, with 12 fragments per shot. And we don't care about the damage, so we're using Streamline Rounds, Rapid Attacks 3, Rigwald's Ferocity, and then we also have Life Leech, so that when the Riven armor doesn't, like, a debuff goes away, we don't instantly go down to like 0 life after shooting like really fast, right? And this seems to be doing the most, so it's every shot is doing about 60% of your high velocity round damage, and since we're doing it so often, it's doing a lot of that. Emergency reload, Sniper's Mark, just for more damage with the high velocity round. Charge regulation, we're able to get endurance charges and frenzy charges. Endurance charge from the Armor Break 3 on Siege Cascade, and the frenzy charges from Combat Frenzy when we pin. And then Scavenge Plating, more armor. That's the basis of our defense. Our defense right now is about 13.3k, and it goes up to like 25 around there while we're mapping, and Scavenge Plating stacks up. And then we also have Sorcery Ward. This goes up to like 10, 11k when we're mapping as well, or fighting enemies. And then for the companion, I deactivated it because the frozen mandible makes a loud noise all the time. So yeah, we have Haste Aura and all damage shocks. Those are pretty much the most important ones, and we're able to fit all this with 136 spirit. So let's move on to the items. We have Last Lament, basis of the build. We can shoot without having to reload, and that lets us do as many hits of the Riven armor debuff as possible with these rounds. And then Siege Cascade just feels pretty good when you don't have to reload. Alright. And then for the helmet, Constricting Command, the surrounding nodes are pretty overpowered, so take advantage of it while you can. You need this to require 5 fewer enemies, so always be surrounded. And then we have the amulet. I have spirit, so you need at least 36 spirit if you have all the passive points as I do. and then increased global defenses, increased armor, level of all projectile skills, and then I have rarity for a suffix, but if you just want damage, then it'd probably be crit chance and crit damage are probably the best ones. And then for the rings, resistances, life, rarity, and leech is what I have for both of them. And then for the gloves, almost same idea, armor base, and then we have life, resistances, and armor applies elemental damage. Same thing for this, but the only special node would be, or the prefix would be physical damage from hits taken as chaos damage. This helps mitigate a lot for armor, because, you know, big hits aren't good, can't deal with that too well, so this helps that. Belt, armor, life, resistances, and then the boots, probably the most expensive part of the build. Movement speed, life, and then the increased effect socketed items. And I have the reduced movement speed penalty from skills while moving. So we have about like 70 to 80%, I'd say, reduced movement speed penalty from using skills while moving, which makes it feel a lot better in this game. And then for the weapon swap, we have a different crossbow. This crossbow is extremely unoptimized. It could be way better base, everything like that. It's just the only one I'm using. And we have physical damage. We want to scale that as much as possible, so you want ideally T1s. This prefix deals 90% increased damage with hits against enemies, pretty good. Level of all attack skills, of course, for essence. And then crit hit chance and crit damage bonus, both flat values, to make the high velocity rounds crit as much as possible and do as much damage. So after that, let's talk about the passive tree. So with the passive tree, like I said, we'll start with the ascendancy too. I have weapon master. That's the basis of the build. I wanted to try it out because it just sounded really cool. And we also have sorcery reward, taking all points of that, and then zealous inquisition. Clear on this build is not that amazing, but it's okay, and it gets better with zealous inquisition, especially with the abyss monsters. And then for the passive tree, it's pretty crazy looking, but that's why you have the 100 weapon swap passive points. So we'll talk about the skeleton first. So without the weapon swap, we're just moving down to surrounded nodes essentially, and then we have to hit all the jewels and the keystones we need. So we're hitting iron reflexes, and we're climbing all the way up here to get this, but we'll talk about that later. And then we also get these important nodes, which are reservation efficiency of companion skills. You do need both of these to be able to get the perfect amount of spirit to reserve everything that you have. I'm sure you could probably anoint this and then get rid of this if you have more spirit, but haven't really tested that. And then let's talk about weapon swap 1. So that's the red nodes around here. We're basically scaling armor, and then we're getting life leech here, and we're taking almost every single movement speed node that we're able to without like being too costly. So we're taking these movement speed penalty as well, and then we are getting some armor break nodes. This is mostly for the time loss jewel, but tempered defense is pretty good. Armor applies elemental damage, right? We have blind on hit, which activates our skill node for blind side on high velocity rounds. And then I do have this leeching life from companion. Leeching life applies to companion. It's okay. I'm sure you could just do Brutus's brain and ignore that, but then we would lose shock, I believe. Haven't tested that too well as well. And then for weapon swap 2, we're just going pretty much into full crit nodes as we can. These nodes are useless, but you can't go to jewel sockets, so that's why we're taking these. We're taking all the crit here against marked enemies, crit against blinded, increased critical hit damage bonus right here as well, and then more crit damage. And these are just efficient nodes for 16%, because we're only using it for bossing anyways. And then let's talk about the jewels. So we'll start with the Undying Hate. This jewel is pretty important for the build, for the survivability. Since we are a life leech build, we take Sacrifice of Flesh, which is Progenesis from POE1. Basically minus 20% damage taken with no downside, because our life leech is really strong. And then we have Megalomaniac, if I can find it. Yep, right here. This one probably hard to find an exact copy, but you could find things that benefit the build, so armor and crit damage bonus and things like that. So I have those two. And then this time loss jewel, it's pretty good. It increased effect of notable skills in radius, global physical damage, life leech, and armor. Those are the nodes that I wanted. And the notable one, it's pretty crazy here because it gives 20% more increased attack damage, not more, and then 2% movement speed, more armor applies to elemental, and it doesn't reach all the way here, but you know, it's pretty efficient time loss jewel right here. Yeah, and that is the passive skill tree. I do believe there's a lot that can be optimized with this build. Like I said, this crossbow can be way better, and I'm sure if you can get it way better, you're going to be doing way more damage. You saw in the videos at the beginning, it can deal with pinnacles. Xesht, if they move around too much, it can be a little difficult, but with ritual, it's fine. It might take a little longer if they're teleporting around, things like that. But yeah, there's a lot to be improved with this build, and charms could be changed. You can get all Ross Flask and make this a better bosser and better mapper. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks.